Hey guys, here for your next installment of video lessons. We're going to be talking about Ronald Reagan in the 1980s. Basically, as the 1980s approach, people go away from they've gotten tired of the activism of the 60s and the liberalism of Carter and kind of his weakness, and people were ready for a change. So in the 1980s, they're going to be a conservative era, especially in the presidency. So we're going to talk about Reagan, who revolutionized American politics, the 1980 election, the Reagan Revolution, and we're also going to talk about Reaganomics. All right, so the first thing that we need to talk about is, of course, the presidential election. And in the 1980 presidential election, people are ready for a change. They lost confidence in the government of Jimmy Carter. The night after the 60s and Watergate, the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, of course, the Iranian hostage crisis, the gas lines, all these things that had happened in the 60s and 70s basically leave Americans kind of on the edge. And many people blame Carter for this crisis in confidence. He didn't fix any problems. It just seems to keep getting worse. The Iranian hostage crisis is a perfect example. After the Iranian Revolution, hostages are taken prisoner after the United States allows the Shah to enter the country, and Carter seems powerless to stop it. He sends a failed rescue mission, and basically you see opposition to Carter growing. And conservative movement, Reagan's talking about government's not the solution to your problems. Government is the problem. It's kind of a refreshing, optimistic ideology. So Reagan wants to return to a simpler time. Return, of course, is used kind of lightly because the time never really existed, but lower taxes, small government, strong military, and conservative moral values. And he wanted to focus on family, work, community or neighborhood, peace, and freedom. And the main thing he asked in his campaign, it was a real genius of his campaign, is they honed in, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? And of course, for most people, they're going to say no. He and his running mate, George H.W. Bush, win in a landslide, and the Republicans also took the Senate in that election. This is called the Reagan Revolution. Reagan had begun as a Democrat, but by 1962 he had become a Republican. He always said that he didn't leave the Democratic Party left him. So he becomes the governor of California shortly after, and starts trying to cut the size of government. After 2 terms of mixed results, he runs for the presidency. He's originally defeated, but he becomes a hero of the new right, a new conservative, neoconservative movement rising up through the Republican Party. He was a very big personality, very good communicator, optimistic, and he uses acting skills to his advantage. He's a former actor, used to be in lots of westerns and things of that nature, but he uses those skills to win people to his side, even people on the other side. So the new right forges a new conservative coalition. Conservative media commentators, think tanks like the Heritage Foundation, and grassroots Christian organizations are going to kind of form this new coalition. And it did things like endorsing school prayer, deregulating the economy, lower taxes, smaller government, stronger military, and a teaching of Bible-based accounts of human creation. So they opposed gun control, abortion, homosexual rights, school busing, equal rights amendment, affirmative action, and nuclear disarmament. So it forges a coalition of economic conservatives, of social conservatives, and those opposed to a lot of the legislation of the civil rights era. So it does create a coalition of these different groups. And he becomes the speaker for the new right and draws many Americans to his side. Very eloquent speaker and very popular. All right, so the new right grows in influence with the rise of televangelism. People like Jerry Falwell, who founded the Moral Majority in 1979, lead the charge of the new right, neoconservatism, whatever you want to call it. Reagan, again, a powerful personality. His acting skills served him well in politics. He becomes known as the great communicator. He has a really great way of taking complex issues and boil them down to their barest, most sparse points and communicating that to massive amounts of people. As a president, he's very good at persuading the other side to work with it. Of course, his wife, Nancy, is also very tough, hard-nosed, and she was an important advisor to her husband on political affairs, less so on foreign policy or domestic policy. When it came to political affairs, she was important and doggedly protect her husband. So Reagan wanted to do a few things. He wanted to reduce the federal bureaucracy. He wanted to deregulate industry, cut taxes, increase the federal budget, and take a hard line with communists. He also wanted to appoint conservative judges and justices to the federal bench. So, in the first few months, he got much of what he wanted. He was very, very strong, and this actually is buttressed by the fact that he survives the assassination attempt on his life, which kind of gives him an air of toughness and invincibility as well. He also was very decisive in his actions oftentimes. Early on, air traffic controllers went on strike, and it really put a hindrance on U.S. air traffic and air travel, and he basically fires them and forces air traffic controllers to come back come back to work. So his plan for tax spending had two goals. He wanted to reduce taxes because he believed that reducing taxes would stimulate economic growth, and he wanted to cut the federal budget. And this is based on the idea of supply-side economics, much different from the Keynesian economics that have been at play for much of the last 30 or 40 years. And this theory says that brakes for businesses will increase the supply of goods and services, which reduces prices and aids the economy. Supply-side economics means that tax cuts and business incentives basically to wealthy or business owners or corporations will cause them to invest more in business, which will create more jobs, economic growth, and create more goods and services, which will reduce prices. And this theory appealed to conservatives because it's much like the laissez-faire economics of the early 1900s, late 1800s, early 1900s, which had very minimum government regulation. Reagan's budget director was a guy named David A. Stockman, very controversial, but he went to Congress asking for tax cuts, saying they would stimulate business who would pay more taxes because they would pay more money and eliminate the budget deficit. Congress passed many components of Reaganomics. However, critics of Reaganomics claim that the tax breaks simply made the rich richer and the wealth never trickles down. So you get the name for it of trickle-down economics. And they said that tax cuts combined with increased military spending wouldn't cut the deficit, it would just increase it. Even Vice President Bush, when he ran against Reagan for the 1980 nomination, called it voodoo economics. And during 1981 and 82, the nation does suffer a deep recession, the worst since the Great Depression at that time. Unemployment is going to rise, government revenues fall, and this sends federal spending and the federal deficit soaring. So, early on you have mixed results. Now, in the Cold War, Reagan is steadfastly anti-communist. In his first term, he rejects the policy of containment and détente. He's not trying to contain the spread of communism. He's not trying to lessen tensions. Reagan wants to destroy communism. He believes it is the evil empire, that the Soviet Union is the evil empire, and it needs to be destroyed, not contained, and tensions not be eased with them. So he goes after massive increases in military spending, and much of that spending goes to rebuild the nuclear arsenal. And he also promotes the Strategic Defense Initiative, And this was supposed to be a missile shield that would protect the United States against oncoming missiles. Of course, people criticize him for this because the science really wasn't there yet and said it wouldn't work. But the SDI becomes now what we call, what people made fun of back then actually now exists in many different cases. So by the late 70s, the Soviet Union is shrinking. Industrial farm output are falling. Soviet Union starts having to import food, and you have Soviet satellite states begin to protest for independence. This happens in Poland. Lech Walesa leads a anti-Soviet group to try to loosen Soviet restrictions and hold on Poland. Walesa actually forces the Soviet government to legalize independent trade unions, independent from the communist movement. His movement comes to be known as, or his union comes to be known as Solidarity. It's eventually going to gain the independence of the Polish people. Something else happens that starts to thaw the relationship. Mikhail Gorbachev comes to power in the Soviet Union. He's a visionary, and he believes that the only way to save the Soviet Union is to basically deal with the United States. So between 85 and 88, Reagan and Gorbachev meet 4 times, form a really interesting relationship, and they produce the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, which reduces the first treaty that actually reduced nuclear arms. It destroys an entire class of weapons, totaling over 2,500. However, foreign trouble spots, especially Cold War related ones, remain a problem. Latin America, the United States supports several anti-communist governments and rebel groups in the region, and that's going to lead to some trouble with the Iran-Contra. In Lebanon, the United States went to try to stop the civil war in that country, and U.S. troops are killed as a result. Grenada, 5,000 Marines are sent to stop a violent communist coup. If you've seen Heartbreak Ridge, that's based on Grenada. And then in South Africa, Congress actually overrides a Reagan veto to help place sanctions and end apartheid in South Africa. All right, so in Latin America, the United States works in a number of places to try to stop communist expansion. In El Salvador, the Reagan administration supported a moderate leader named Jose Napoleon Duarte, who wins the 1984 election. In Nicaragua, a U.S.-backed leader was overthrown, and Reagan cuts off aid to Nicaragua and says that the Sandinistas are backed by the Soviets. CIA then equips an opposition group called the Contras. Now, Congress cut off funds to the Contras and banned all further direct or indirect U.S. support of them. This is going to become important down the road. In the Middle East, you have problems. In Lebanon, Muslim and Christian groups wage a civil war in Lebanon. Israel invaded Lebanon to push out the Palestinian Liberation Organization, and the United States sent 800 peacekeepers, mostly Marines. During that occupation, a suicide bomber drove a truck bomb into a Marine barracks in Lebanon, in Beirut, and killed 241 Marines, after which Reagan withdraws the troops. In Grenada, you had a communist coup that stranded 800 U.S. students. Reagan sent in the Marines, who took the island in 2 days with the loss of 19 soldiers and rescued the students. Now, South Africa is not a military intervention, but basically Reagan wanted constructive engagement. He wanted to still deal with the white minority government, but Congress overrode a veto and imposed strict trade limits and other sanctions that eventually helped lead to the end of apartheid. So some of these issues lead to Iran-Contra affair. What happened is hostages have been taken in Lebanon during that whole thing. And the Reagan administration sells weapons to Iran in violation of a U.S. arms embargo, and then takes the money and pays off the Contras in violation of the law. And as it comes out, it shows that Vice Admiral John Poindexter, Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North are selling weapons to the Contras. Reagan admits that he knows about the weapons sales, not selling weapons to the Contras, sending money to the Contras. But Reagan admits he knows about the weapons sales, but not about the sending money to the Contras. North admits to destroying key level documents. High-level Reagan administration Officials are accused of lying, and it becomes a huge controversy that mars Reagan's presidency.